Hi, this is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6, Delta Alpha Yankee, and for today's video I'm finally going to be getting around to talking about the Yaesu FT-70. This is going to be an uncomfortable video for me to do because it's pretty easy to determine based on the amount of content I put out on these four radios right here and the amount that I talk about these radios that I am in fact very much a fan of Yaesu HTs, and that remains true. I still am very, very positive about these four radios right here. I use them a lot. I talk about them a lot, and I still have videos that I have to do on these radios, some little tips, tricks, that kind of stuff. But when it comes to the 70, I've implied a number of times that I am not a fan of this radio, and that remains to be true. In fact, before I did this video, the weekend before this video is coming out, I spent the entire weekend with the FT-70. We went on a road trip. I used it for the whole weekend. I just wanted to give it one last shot, see if my initial impressions of the radio were still true and valid, and they still remain true and valid. While this is a great radio in many respects, Yaesu so horribly missed the mark on one particular thing with this radio that they basically ruined it. And it's sad because this could have been a great radio. This could have been what it was supposed to be. And let's talk about what this radio was supposed to be. Now, I don't have any insider information. I haven't talked to anyone at Yaesu. I'm just going off of what a lot of people surmised based on how this radio is designed, what it's set up to do, how it's priced. It's a pretty easy jump to make that this was the intended successor to the FT-60. The FT-60 is an old design. It's been around since 2004. It's still a great radio, but there's some things that it's lacking. A lot of people wanted an upgrade in the battery. They wanted to be able to do some digital with it. They wanted some improvements to the menu system. There were a number of improvements that were obvious, that were upgrades from the 60 that were incorporated into the FT-70, but somewhere along the line, somebody in their design department wrecked it. And I will get to that. But before I do, I want to talk about the good parts of the radio, and I want to kind of talk about, just lay the specs out real quick, and then I'll get into what's got me bothered. But I will also say this. If you're an owner of an FT-70, this isn't any slight on your character. If you like your FT-70, if your FT-70 works fine for you, that's wonderful. I'm happy. I genuinely am happy that some people are enjoying the radio because, as I said, as a radio, just as I hold it in your hand, press the PTT and talk into it, this is an excellent little radio. But it's other aspects that make it fall flat on its face. But let's talk about the specs real fast and see how they compare, and you'll kind of see pretty clearly why this is the obvious successor to the FT-60. In terms of price, typical FT-60 pricing is $154.95. And these are prices I've obtained through Gigaparts and Ham Radio Outlet primarily. Their prices are usually identical to each other. The FT-70, on the other hand, is $174.95. So you're talking about an increase of $20, which is not unprecedented when you're talking about an upgrade product. A car manufacturer, for instance, one model year to the next, their prices never stay the same and they never go down, they always increase. So I see what they've done here, not a huge issue. Do you get as much value in the package though? You do not. The FT-60 comes with the usual stuff, the radio, the battery, the antenna, the belt clip, but it also comes with a cradle charger. The FT-70 does not. The cradle charger is going to be an additional $30-something expenditure that you're going to have to throw out. And now your actual real street price on the thing, if you want to be able to, bumped into the tripod again. If you want to be able to charge batteries while you're using the radio, your actual street price on this is going to be, if you want the same equipment delivered, it's going to be more like $205, maybe $210, to get the same outfitting that you get with an FT-60. So the prices now start to become a bit of a problem, but again, it's not that much of a jump. But in reality, if we're talking same stuff, we are talking about a difference in price of getting close to $50 now. So, and I'll get into another additional expenditure that you're going to have to lay in a bit. It's actually going to move the street price on this radio to something more like $250. But in terms of general specs, both of them are dual band radios. They do 2 meter, 70 centimeter. 144 to 148 megahertz for 2 meter, and 430 to 450 megahertz for 70 centimeter. Now, the difference between the two radios, of course, the FT-70 will do digital. It'll do C4FM System Fusion, which is definitely an upgrade in performance, and System Fusion is actually a digital mode. Pretty easy to work with, a lot easier to work with than something like DMR. Although for those people out there that are working kind of on the edge of things, do understand for this to work, has to have a call sign. So you're always going to be sending a call sign with that digital transmission. Getting into receive capability, the receive capability, it takes a bit of a dip actually with the FT-70. What the FT-60 will give you is you have the airband, which is 108 to 137 megahertz. You have AM/FM, which is going to be, it's going to go all the way from 137 to 520 megahertz is going to be on receive. And then you have the addition of 700 to 999 megahertz, excluding cell phone stuff. Now the 70 will do 108 to 137 on the airband. Okay, same. Then it'll do 137 to 580 megahertz. So a little bit more range in terms of FM receive, but no 700 to 999. Now, is that a practical thing? I don't monitor anything above 700. So for me, not a big deal. So I'm going to call that a wash actually. Both feature double conversion super heterodyne receivers, which is excellent. Now, when it comes to memory channels, the FT-60, of course, will do 1,000 memory channels. The 70, it's kind of odd. Now, depending on who you talk to, it's either 900 or 1105. And a lot of those extra frequencies are going to be things like edge band frequencies and pre-programmed stuff. Okay. In practical terms, the memories that I can actually put into the radio using my RT Systems program is 900. In all, it's close enough to not really be an issue. Now, one thing that I like a lot about the 60, and the 60 is the only Yaesu that'll do this, is when it comes to memory banks. You have 10 memory banks, but you can allocate an unlimited number of channels to those memory banks. So I could have all 10 memory banks filled with all 100 or 1,000 channels. Each one could be the same. That's not a practical thing to do, but one thing I do like is, for instance, I break mine up into counties. So I can have, for instance, LA County on one memory bank, and I can have all of the frequencies for LA County in there, all of the repeaters, and that definitely exceeds the number of 50 for sure, or even 100 channels. But with the 70, you do get more memory banks. You get 24 of them, but the problem is you're capped at 100 channels per memory bank, which is a bit of a problem. Now we're going to get to kind of our first negative issue. It has to fit in here because the next thing you talk about is in terms of programming these radios. Now there are some folks out there that, to them, 125 channels or 128 channels or even 200 channels is plenty. They just program in whatever's local, and that's that. And they might even do that from the front panel and never even put the thing on a computer. I like to break my stuff up into regions. Now, for instance, if I'm talking about, let me grab this one. If I'm talking about something like, let's slide this in, my Anytone, I still have work to do on it, but I'm working on filling this with every usable repeater in the entire state of California, all of Nevada, and all of western Arizona and parts of northern Mexico. And it'll happen because this thing's got, like, I believe it's 5,000 channels available, memory channels. But like I say, I'm one of those guys, I like to have a lot of channels in there in case I'm moving around, in case I'm traveling. So for instance, if I'm using the FT-60 and I'm taking a trip to Southern California, I can have everything in Tulare County, Kern County, Ventura County, Los Angeles County, Orange County, San Diego. I can set that whole channel plan up, and that could involve something in the neighborhood of like 700 memory channels that I'm putting in. And I have a number of channel schemes like that that I have set up. But again, when you get to the 70, while you get more memory or more memory banks, you have fewer memories that you can put into each of them. So I consider that to be a step back. But having said that, my VX6, it's also capped as well. It doesn't have unlimited memory or unlimited memory channels from the memory bank. So, okay, I can live with that. But where I ran into a problem with this, now, I Honestly, I haven't even determined if there's been a change here. I remember when I first went to program this radio, I don't think it was chirp supported at the time. I understand it is now. But I used the supplied Yaesu, I think it's called the ADMS-10 programming or CPS system to program this radio via the computer. And like I say, because I handle so many channels, I have to use a computer to fully program a radio up. Sitting there with the front panel, it would take me 2 weeks to program a radio, whereas I can do it in a mid morning with my computer just by cutting and pasting. But when I went to use the ADMS-10 program, it was awful, and it's a very stripped down version of an RT Systems program. And one thing I found right away was that I was not able to effectively program the memory banks. I flat could not get it to work, no matter what I did. I searched around quite a bit, and I found that there was a very complicated workout workthrough that you could do from the front panel to make it work. But sitting there trying to do that with anywhere from 600 to 800 channels look, my time is worth a certain amount of money. So what I ended up having to do in order to have full use and fully program the radio was, for the first and only time, I had to actually purchase RT Systems software. Now, one nice benefit of doing this was, in purchasing the RT Systems program, I was able to get a much easier scheme to program the radio. Because one of the first things, and I used to call this Yaesu's Department of Wacky Ideas, and I thought it was funny at first. Now it just pisses me off. But let me briefly describe the process for programming this radio. So if you want to hook it up to the Yaesu factory programming, or if you want to do it through Chirp, let me just briefly read the process that you have to go through to program this radio, because it's freaking insane. I don't know why, and this, by the way, is not the reason I don't like this radio, but it's a contributing factor. So here's the first thing you do. You start your computer program, okay? So you get your computer program all fired up. Then, don't plug it in yet. Nope, 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 nope. That would completely fly in the face of common sense. Unlike every other damn radio out there in the world, you plug the radio, you plug the USB cable into the radio, plug it into the computer, having started your programming. You read the radio to the computer, you make your edits, you write the program to the radio, unplug, and you are good to go. They all do that, except for this one. Here's your process. Start your program. Remove the battery from the radio. Yes, remove the battery from the radio. Plug in the power cord, and external DC will be displayed. Power up the radio. Okay. Unplug the power cord. Yes, unplug the power cord. Plug in the USB cable. Now you get to do that. Hold the AMS button down, which is right here. Okay, so you're going to hold the AMS button down while plugging the power cord into the radio again. ADMS will show up on the display. Then go to your computer and do whatever you need to do as far as, read from radio, download from radio, etc. And press OK. Then you're going to need to press the band button on the radio once you've done that. Hopefully, you'll see some dotted lines and the letters TX, and that's going to basically indicate that the computer is reading from the radio at that point. So then you get to do your edits, and then you get to click Upload to Radio, and then you press the Mode button after you press Upload to Radio, and you should see ... RX, and that's going to write it to the radio. And then once that's done, you can unplug, put your damn battery back in, and go. That, folks, is insane. Whereas with the RT Systems, you just basically do what you do with every other radio. You plug the cable in, you start the program, plug the cable in, plug it into your computer, hit read from radio, make your edits, hit write to radio, upload it to the radio, turn the whole thing off, and you're done. So that was the first thing that kind of had me really scratching my head about this radio. And then, let me get on to, I've talked enough about that nonsense. So we've talked about the memory channels, we've talked about the banks, we've talked about how to program it. Let's real quick go through RF power. Same, pretty much 5 watts, 2 watts, and 0.5 watts for your high, medium, and low. Batteries, 1400 milliamp battery, and it's nickel metal hydride in the FT-60. Little upgrade here, we got lithium ion, and it's 1800 milliamps. And that's pretty much the specs, okay? Oh, one last thing before I get back to battery. Stated IP54. This has been tested to be IP54, which means it's splash resistant. You can take it out and play in the rain, but you can't submerge it. FT-60 does not have IP54 rating, but as I talked about in the last video that I did, there's sealing done in there. It's weather resistant to a point, but probably not as weather resistant as the 70. So those are the radios compared. But like I said, you have an upgrade in price. So you got 154, 174. You got another 30 bucks you're going to need to spend on a cradle charger. Probably more like 35. So we're at about 210. Then again, if you want to be able to program your radio via your computer and not have to do a bunch of insane nonsense, and then also at the same time achieve the ability, and believe me, the only reason I bought that program was to achieve the ability to program memory banks, because none of the other programs would do it. You're going to be talking for the RT Systems package with the programming cable. It's like 40 bucks. So now we're talking about a radio that's $250 to be as fully featured as this radio. So we're talking a $100 increase in price here. Now this radio is going to have to do some amazing things to be better than this radio, other than the digital aspect, okay? When it comes to digital though, if you want something that isn't $500, the FT-70, and if you want to use Fusion, this is your only option right here, which is kind of sad. But let's move this aside for a second and talk mainly now about the 70. And I blew right over the battery, but let's get to the battery. And the battery is not the issue I have with the radio. But any perusal of any Facebook user group for the FT-70 is going to immediately, you're going to see right away people complaining about the battery on this radio. Now there are some power schemes that you can apply in the programming to extend the life of the battery, but one complaint that a lot of people have is this battery, while it's larger than the one for the 60, this battery is pretty light in the loafers. It doesn't last very long. Now, my experience has not been as bad as other people. There's some people that will claim that you can key up, have a couple of contacts, and monitor and not even get 4 or 5 hours out of this radio. That's not been my experience. My experience has been that the battery, in all honesty, and again, this applies to my model, is really not any better or worse than the one in the FT-60. In terms of battery life, it's fine. I very deliberately tested this after I first got it, and I started reading about people complaining about the battery. And I did, for instance, one night I did a Skywarn net using this radio. Everything went just fine. And then I monitored for about a day and a half, and then I needed to do a charge. That's about what I get out of an FT-60. No complaints there. Having said that, there's enough people complaining about the battery life on this to lead me to believe that they either had some batteries that were not up to quality standards that got out into the wild. That could be the case. Not totally sure. But I'll tell you one thing. Yaesu could do themselves a huge favor by coming out with something like the extended battery that you can get for the FT-65. This damn battery, now I never had a problem with the FT-65 battery life. This battery is amazing. You really get some life out of this, and it doesn't add that much bulk to the radio. It would not be that difficult for them to do exactly the same thing with this. I don't know why they haven't done it so far. All I can figure is it has something to do with the cradle charger. Maybe the cradle charger isn't deep enough. I think maybe on the 65, they calculated that into the design of the cradle charger. But here's the pisser. They don't provide a cradle charger with this. So who cares? Redesign the cradle charger and give us a bigger battery and stop messing around. But they don't. And I'm not aware of any larger batteries. If any of you have come across any, maybe on the aftermarket side of things, I'd be interested. But when it does come to battery life, though, here's one of the problems. Okay, so if you're using this radio as a field radio, because it only charges through here, and much like the FT-60, if you have external DC plugged in, it's going to run the radio, but it's not going to charge the battery while you're using it. So you're not really getting any benefit out of that. So if you want to charge, pretty much everybody, and it's kind of an established thing, you get yourself an extra battery, right? Well, you need something to charge that battery in, and I use a cradle charger. It's in my MCOM bag. I take it out to the field. Every radio I take to the field has a cradle charger with it, so that I can charge the backup battery in the field while I'm using this, so I can cycle batteries through an entire weekend. So again, you're gonna need another battery. You're gonna need a battery or cradle charger to charge that while this is in use. So, all right, that's a problem with just about any radio out there. And I could easily make the same claim about the VX6. VX6 doesn't come with a cradle charger either, so I'll get off of that. So I've talked about complaints about the battery is one thing. I've not had that experience. The programming sequence is bananas. Again, whoever came up with that, it kind of goes towards understanding mindset. Like the term actions speak louder than words. If you want to discover crazy, just watch what people do. Whoever designed that is, I think, an avant-garde kind of character. And I suspect it's the person that designed the thing that kills this radio for me. We're going to get to the meat of it now. I have been carrying radios for all of my adult life. It started when I went into the Air Force, and I was issued radios when I was in the security police. It went on to when I worked private security. It went on to when I worked loss prevention. It went on to when I worked for the Kings County Sheriff's Department. I have carried radios my whole life. If I had a nickel for every time I reached down and turned the volume up or down on my radio, I would probably have enough to buy a reasonably priced used car at this point. I am forever fiddling with the volume on my radios. I do it for one reason is my hearing isn't all that terrific, but even back when my hearing was young and still intact, you get people that will talk a little too far away from the mic, or you get people that will talk a little too close to the mic. And when it comes to ham radio, you get people that don't understand mic gain settings. And I have guys, for instance, in my radio club that for years, we have a guy that runs our club net who everybody tells him, dude, turn your mic up or get closer to your mic. And he just doesn't do it. So to listen to the guy, you got to crank it all the way up. Then you get somebody with proper mic gain, and now they're blowing you out, so you got to turn it down. So you're constantly moving up and down. It's just a thing, and you don't realize it until you have to do it. I'll give you a really quick story. I had this old recliner that my wife finally convinced me to get rid of and get another chair because it was just destroying my back. The recliner was all busted down, but it is what I would call an analog recliner because it had just a little lever. You'd reach down, you'd flip the lever on the side of the chair, and it would kick the footrest out, and you were good to go. And when you needed to get up, you just pressed down with your legs and you stood up and you were done, right? But she buys me, and I was there, I selected the chair. I got this chair that had all these push buttons and everything was electric and everything was digital, right? So in order to kick the footrest out on this chair, I have to press this button until it gets to the position I want, which is never exact or exactly the same as it was before. So I'm forever fiddling with that. But when I have to get out of the chair, I have to press the same button, and it goes down very slowly. So when my bulldog is attacking my chihuahua and I'm having to get over there real quick and break up a dog fight, it takes forever to get out of the damn chair. When I first got the chair, I loved it. Within a week, I absolutely hated it because it was something that I didn't anticipate was going to be a problem that became a massive problem. Thus, the situation with the volume dial on this radio. I have, just to see if I had it right or not. I watched a lot of reviews on this radio over the past couple of weeks. Each and every time, the reviews were obviously done by somebody who had this radio sent to them for review. And when it would come to the subject of the volume control on this radio, here's what was said almost every time in slightly different ways. But they would get to the volume control and they would say, yeah, it's something you're going to have to get used to, or it's something you'll probably get used to. No, you won't get used to it. Now, here's your typical volume control on a standard radio. So we'll use the FT-70, for example. So the FT-70, if I want to change the channels, I just turn that knob. Okay, we're good to go. If I want to turn the volume up and down, I just turn this knob up or I turn this knob down, okay? If I want to do that with my VX6, again, I have a little knob here that I can go down, or, well, that'll change channel. Sorry, I forgot about that. I was playing around with another radio, which I'll point that out now. Let's talk about Yaesu's inconsistency in volume control, since it's an issue. Let's turn on the FT3. So the FT3, if I want to turn the volume up and down, oh no, that changes the channel. But on this radio, it changes the volume. So the upper knob is volume control in this radio. On the FT3, the upper knob is channel control. The lower knob is volume. And then on the FT, or the VX6, the lower knob is channel. I don't get it. How hard is this to figure out? But why would you have, within the same company, two stacked volume and channel control knobs, both completely different than the other? I don't care which one does what, but I'm forever getting confused between the two radios as to what does what. But if you get to the FT-70, you want to turn your volume up and down. What most people are accustomed to doing is reaching down, turning a knob. Well, that turns the channel. There's no other knob on there. So how do you do your volume? Well, the way you turn your volume up and down is you have to hold the radio. Now, some people said, well, you can figure out a way to do this with one hand by doing this weird gymnastics thing, and I imagine that's why they have these extra little projections on the top of the knob. But right above the power button is a little button that's marked VOL. You hold this down, and you got to keep holding it down, and then you can adjust your volume. Now, for people that are just using this radio sitting on a side table and are using it just as an AM, you know, it's just a handheld ham radio. Nothing on the line, we're not out in the field, that kind of stuff. A lot of folks can get used to that. In fact, I was doing it all weekend, forever holding that down. But here's what happens to me about every fifth time I do it. If I'm not really thinking about what I'm doing, the button just beneath the volume control is your power button. So I'm going to hold that down. I'm going to just turn the radio off. So I needed to turn it up in order to hear a transmission. I'm holding down what I think is a volume knob, and I just turn the damn radio off, and I miss the entire transmission altogether. But now let me compound the problem. Let's put the radio into a pouch. So if you're running your radio in a pouch, and I'll use the VX6 as an example here. So let's put this into one of our Spectre Gear radio pouches. Okay, so if I need to adjust my volume or adjust my channel, I don't have to take the radio out of the pouch. I just reach down and I turn the knob. But if I'm using this radio in a pouch and I want to adjust my volume, I have to take the radio out of the pouch each and every time. Now, if you have this mounted on a plate carrier or a load-bearing harness, and you've got everything all wired in with your earpiece or your headset or whatever you're using to listen in, plus the fact that you're side ported on this, so it is a bit of a pain in the ass to get it in and out of the pouch every single time, it's going to drive you certifiably insane after a very short period of time, having to do that every time. Because again, as I said, you're going to want to turn that volume up and down a whole hell of a lot, and you can't do it on this radio without extracting it from the pouch and holding the button down and turning. Now, there are other radios such as the FT-65 and the FT-4X that only have volume control on the top and channel control is on the front panel. So if I want to adjust my channels up and down, yeah, I'd need to extract this from the pouch and then bounce my channels up and down. But how often are you changing channels versus how often are you doing the volume? This is a compromise I can live with, because most of the time you're just going to be operating on one channel, unless you're doing some kind of command frequency stuff, in which case I would just use two different radios and two different headsets, because it is a pain to be switching back on channels. Plus, if you're on the other channel, you can't hear what's going on the other one. If I was in that kind of mode, I just used another radio. But the volume control, that's the most important thing on the top. So had they just done it the other way around and made this volume control and made this channel selection. So to change channels, you just held that button down and rotated the knob. It would be a completely different story in terms of this radio. I would be doing a completely different review at this point, in fact, and I would be talking about how this radio is the obvious successor to the FT-60, and I would be recommending this for use out in the field. Or, God forbid, you just take a couple extra bucks, since you're already charging us a lot for this radio, put a damn stacked volume and channel control knob right there. Okay, it's not that hard to do. It looks almost like everything's the same there. And then you would have the problem completely solved. And then you genuinely would have a radio that would be the true and worthy successor to the FT-60. As it stands right now, the FT-70 basically only appeals to people that don't use their radios in the field at all. And while that's a slice of the market, that's not a very big slice of the market. And with the ham radio community changing as it is, and with a lot more folks getting involved in amateur radio because they're doing outdoor activities and they're taking these radios along with them, they need a radio that's been thought through by somebody who's actually walked outside of their office, out of the design office, and actually used a radio outside in the wild. Whoever designed the FT-70 is not that person. So that's the reason right there. I'm not going to say in a nutshell because this is a damn 31-minute video, but that's the reason I don't like the FT-70. It is, in all other ways, an excellent radio. Again, it does weird stuff with the programming. It does some oddball. The battery, I don't know. On that one, I'm 50-50 on whether or not that's actually the problem people say it is. But that damn volume control. And I got to also say, I'm going to review the reviewers by having not pointed that out as aggressively as they probably should have, because I looked at quite a few reviews and people just blew right past that volume control issue. They noted it because they would say, yeah, that's kind of odd, that's something you'll have to get used to, and then on to the next thing. Now, that could be for a couple of reasons. One could be just like with the case of my recliner. They didn't use it enough to be annoyed to the degree that I am. That's possible. You know what, I'm excusing. I'm making excuses for them. Now, they should have caught that. They should have noted that, and they should have realized that's going to be a problem. And somebody should have told Yaesu, this is an issue you need to change, you need to fix. When this thing was let out, because like any good company, they're going to let this out to people that use this stuff in the field. They're going to have people that are having to sell these radios. They're going to have to be exposed to this. And someone should have said to Yaesu, now you need to redesign that volume control knob. But they didn't. So if Yaesu were to ever see this video and miraculously go, oh yeah, we could do that, and then throw a stacked volume control knob on there and channel control, that would be just amazing. And I wish they would. But until they come out with a replacement for the FT-70 that addresses that issue, the FT-60 is still going to continue plugging along, doing its thing. And the FT-70 is going to be over in the corner with a lot of people pretty upset over it. And trust me, I'm not the only guy that's noticed this. I'm just the only one, I think, so far that's talked about it to the extent that I have. So with that, I'm going to bring it to an end and just end it by saying this. Look, if you're an FT-70 owner and you like your radio and it works for you, fantastic, absolutely fantastic. If not, okay, well, it is what it is. I can't really go any further with this. So I am going to bring it to a close now. I'm going to wish you all a wonderful day. This is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6, Delta Alpha Yankee in Southwest Visalia, California. 73s.